All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are attending this webinar. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join us for the first joint webinar between Tealium and Catchpoint. My name is Craig Lowell. I'll be serving as the moderator this afternoon. The presentation that we're going to do will cover a great deal about third-party tags, including what they are, what purposes they serve, and how they can affect your web performance, and strategies that you can employ in order to minimize their impact on your sites and your users. Your presenters today will be Jay McCarthy of Tealium and Robert Castley from Catchpoint, and after they finish their presentations, both will stick around to answer any questions that you may have. If you do have a question during the presentation, type it into the chat window and we'll get to it during the Q&A portion at the end of the PowerPoint. Now, to properly introduce our speakers today, Robert Castley is the Senior Performance Engineer for EMEA at Catchpoint Systems. Robert is passionate about web performance and optimization and has over 14 years of web development and performance experience. One of his biggest achievements is developing Mambo, which now lives on as Joomla, one of the world's most popular open source content management systems. And our first speaker will be Jay McCarthy. Jay is the Vice President of Product Marketing at Tealium and is a technology industry veteran with 25 years of experience in a variety of technical and management roles. He's a self-described recovering techie who has been an innovator throughout his career in software, network engineering, and web applications. Prior to that, he was the Vice President of Products for Website Story Inc., now part of Adobe. During his more technical years, Jay was one of the first network engineers involved in the completion of a high-speed internet backbone connecting Northern and Southern California. So Jay, the floor is now yours.
Thanks very much. Well, before we talk about how tags might impact the performance of your site or your mobile app, let's first take a minute to explain what a tag is. So it's important to recognize that the key role that tags play in helping create a modern user experience on your properties. There's a lot of vendors who support your web and mobile infrastructure these days, and many of them rely on tags to deliver that key functionality or data collection. In its simplest form, a tag is a bit of JavaScript, HTML, that delivers that third-party functionality and frequently collects key visitor interaction data. And it's pretty popular. If we look at this practice, it's really ubiquitous these days. So our friend Scott Brinker over at Chief Martech, he tracks almost 2,000 companies that are providing cloud-based services to digital marketers. That number of vendors has nearly doubled in the last year. So you can see it's very popular practice. So how do tags work? Well, browser contains a real treasure trove of valuable information about how a visitor is interacting with your content or your marketing programs. And all of that valuable visitor interaction can be captured through the JavaScript and bundled up in the form of an image request, which transports that information to your partners who are delivering these things like live chat or advertising or personalization to your site. And they come in different flavors. Tags aren't all alike. Some tags are very simple. They might just register a click or a sale of a product. Others are more complex, like the one in the middle. That one might help you measure your audience. And some are very sophisticated, like the one on the right. And that one might be an e-commerce tag that is looking at all of the information about your transactions and upsell opportunities and everything they can collect about your shopping behavior. So what are the challenges to the IT groups? Many tags live across a large portion of your site. You'll need to ensure that your content management system or your e-commerce engine can be leveraged, but it may also include addressing functionality like support or knowledge base portals, international sites, mobile applications, kiosks, all of those technologies. It's also a pretty non-trivial exercise to implement a tag, because you've got to go across all of those technologies which may live under different infrastructure and may be part of different groups within your company. And as with most technologies, tags change too. They're not just something you put on once and forget about them. They're things that are constantly evolving. These vendors are trying to innovate their own technologies, and they get updated by these vendors. And you need to keep track of when these vendors are updating their tags and when you think it might be appropriate to upgrade that JavaScript that lives on your pages. So that can be a big maintenance challenge. And it can be a big maintenance challenge because the expertise required to do that implementation within most companies is often in very short supply. That's JavaScript expertise that you're likely already using in a big way throughout your web development. So what can go wrong? Getting it wrong has consequences. We see examples all the time of otherwise smart, sophisticated technology companies who engineer their tags in a way that could compromise the end user experience. Also, since each request is a request from an individual browser to a third-party server infrastructure, the congestion and performance considerations are hard to assess. Another thing that occurs more often in the advertising world is that a tag image request might chain another image request, or maybe multiple image requests. And if you're in a geography with poor connectivity or you're dealing with just a bad hair day on the internet, those requests can have serious implications to your performance, especially if these tags aren't engineered in a way that reduces the ability for them to break the site. So over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Jay. Well, it seems like tags can really be a handful for IT folks, but what is the actual impact that they have on your website's performance? We decided to run a few tests to find out. In order to measure the true impact of third-party tags, we tested their performance on 10 of the most popular banking, e-com, news and travel sites from 12 different locations across the US. Before testing, we had to separate the first parties, which are the elements served from the internal hosts and CDNs, from the third parties, which are the tags. And here are the results. As Jay mentioned, tags can make requests that trigger other chains of requests. As you can see from the chart, hundreds of requests are made to third-party servers every time a web page loads. And that means there are hundreds of connections that can become interrupted. Do you know where your data is coming from? For those that are unfamiliar, downloaded bytes are the total size of the data downloaded from the page, including page HTML. Just by looking at the percentages, you can see that the tags are downloading a considerable amount of your site's data. Tags are most prevalent on news sites, which regularly report longer wait times than other industries tested, making up nearly 2/3 of the total downloaded bytes. The percentages are lower for travel, banking and e-com sites, but still represent a sizable portion of the data that they deliver to their users. In these two charts, the impact from the third-party tags becomes even clearer. A high average bottleneck time means a delay in loading a third party typically has a larger impact on the page's total load time. Worse yet, if a tag times out, it could cause considerable delays. As expected, due to their prevalence on news pages, those sites show the greatest speed impact due to the third parties, as their presence constitutes nearly half of the total load time. Somewhat surprising is the higher percentage of bottleneck time that e-com sites see from third parties compared to the amount of data on the pages that those third parties comprise, as seen on the previous chart. Content load errors are the total number of elements on the page that the test was unable to load or that experienced errors in loading. As shown by the data, third parties are more prone to failure than first-party page elements, the exception being on travel sites, which saw 50% more first-party errors than third-party errors. This is because there are many more variables that could lead to a third-party variable, many of which Jay mentioned earlier. Unfortunately for websites and their end users, a large number of third-party providers rely on inline JavaScript that is blocking, also called single points of failure. As a result, when these vendors have performance problems or downtime, the end users of their clients can also experience problems. And even if it does not impact the end user's experience, it could still have an impact on your business initiatives in the form of lost data or ad revenue. So what happens if the wrong tag breaks your site? We spotted a potential blocking analytics tag on CNN.com and ran a what-if test in Catchpoint's monitoring tool to see what would happen to the site's performance if the tag request timed out. The results showed that the tag would block the entire page from loading if it failed. For IT, they'd see this ugly waterfall chart and a dismal page speed score. For the users, they'd be forced to stare at a blank screen for 30 seconds before the request timed out and the rest of the page elements loaded. The business side of the shop would see a sharp drop in revenue. While that was an interesting hypothetical situation, major outages caused by third-party failures happen all too frequently. DoubleClick for Publishers, the Google-owned ad server, experienced a significant outage last year. As is often the case with third parties that have large footprints across the internet, the impact was felt by millions of users. DoubleClick provides ads across a number of different hosts, and as you can see from the chart, several of them went offline around the same time. What happened next was a perfect example of why we're always preaching the importance of being vigilant about the third parties that are hosted on your sites, not only who the third party is, but how their tags are built into the back end. Well-known e-commerce and news sites saw their performance and availability suffer as a result of the DoubleClick ads that they were hosting. In addition to preventing web pages from loading, the sheer volume of companies using DFP to advertise means that the outage could have potentially cost publishers millions in lost advertising revenue. Many sites hosted DFP tags, but only some were affected. This is a tale of two configurations. The site in the chart on the left shows a major site that went down as a result of the DFP outage, and their users or customers were either forced to wait for far too long for the page to load, or it was simply unavailable. The site on the right also shows hosted DFP tags, but it was barely impacted by the outage. The likely reason that some sites saw minimal impact from the outage while others experienced major problems lies with how they built the tags into their site. The unaffected sites either place their tags after document complete, which is at the point where users can interact with the page, or they use asynchronous tags which are supported by DoubleClick. This type of failure is not uncommon and highlights the exact reason why any company that hosts its tags as a third party on other sites have to be especially vigilant of their own performance, and companies hosting tags have to be vigilant to not let poor performing providers compromise their own site. So how do IT operation teams handle all these problematic tags without sacrificing their site's overall performance? Fortunately for IT, there are best practices and technologies that can improve your site's performance in the face of all these tags. Save it from failure and shift the control back to IT. Over to you, Jay.
Well, that takes us to tag management. And the simplest way to think about tag management is that we take all this chaos of managing a bunch of wild, feral tags, and we bring them under one umbrella so that you can go to one interface, add, remove, and generally manage all of these relationships that you have with third-party vendors and their tags. And if I can leave you with just one big thing about tag management, something it can do for you to get control over these tags that have the potential to impact your user experience, these blocking tags, aka synchronous tags, can have a heavy impact on the site performance because they force the browser to wait until they're finished before moving on. We at Tealium will commonly rewrite these tags and put them in before we put them into our marketplace of over 750 tags that we support so that we can avoid just this kind of scenario. But there's other benefits of tag management. Even if we prevent the impact to the user experience, we still want the tags to run effectively and efficiently. Some of the other benefits of tag management are having a dedicated team of experts who are maintaining these tags, QAing them, and keeping them up to date. We can also employ best practices like compression, and we can serve these tags from, in our case, a multi-CDN network that chooses the best CDN on performance factors in various geographies to get those tags to the browser as fast as possible. Also with tag management, you only need to load the tags that make sense to load for whatever page makes sense. So, for instance, if your tag is just crediting a sale and only needs to live on a commerce confirmation page, don't load it on every page of your site. Tag management can reduce that loading and put it only on the pages that make sense for that tag. And again, I can't stress this enough. Make sure the tags are only served in a way that aren't going to impact your user experience. That's one of the big things that tag management gives you. And here's a proof point. eConsultancy recently did a survey to companies using tag management, and the result was that over 60% of respondents said that they saw performance improvements after they implemented tag management on their site. Back to you, Robert.
Thank you, Jay. So, tag management systems have many performance benefits, but tag failures are still going to happen, even if they're not toppling your site. Users may not see it, but when a tag fails, you might lose or corrupt your data, fail to serve an ad, or miss a tracking or retargeting opportunity. Here's how you can cut down on failures, hold your vendors accountable, and get on the same page as the rest of your business. It's important to ensure that the goals of the business and marketing teams are aligned with those of the IT department, and that the two are aware of each other's objectives so they can work together to achieve the ultimate goal of increasing revenue. In the case of third-party tag management, this will help you learn the business goals and value associated with your third-party tags, understand the implications of tag failures on the business, communicate your performance goals, establish limits for what sort of performance degradations you're willing to live with as a result of their presence on your site. Take inventory of your current tags and how they're already impacting your site. Decide which metrics are most critical to your site's overall performance, like load time, content availability, number of requests, and number of failures. Using these metrics and your previously discussed business goals, determine the impact and ROI of each of your third parties, considering things such as, what does the tag do? What is the importance to the business? Can it be written asynchronously? Does it load on critical pages? What if it slows down? What if it fails? Simulate blocking or delaying third-party requests to fully understand what impact it may have on your site if its delivery is interrupted. And if you're using Catchpoint, you can perform these what-if tests by using HTTP request overrides with your synthetic monitoring tool. You can also measure using zones to determine the bottleneck times and see how the third parties are impacting your page's load times. Any one tag can harm your performance if it slows or fails, so you must establish a minimum performance requirement and uphold the requirement through consistent testing and monitoring. Here is another opportunity to use a monitoring tool to determine exactly how each provider is delivering their data and their impact on your overall page performance. Consider setting more lenient requirement for tags that bring in more value than others, and this is understood from prior business discussions. Make sure your providers keep their promises to you by building SLAs around your minimum performance requirements. It is imperative you establish a clear-cut, measurable way to identify performance issues caused by the third-party tags so you can report an SLA breach to your providers. It's also important to have a certification process in place that can be used to vet the potential new vendors' presence on your site. Just as you wouldn't let anyone into your house, you must be able to assess every third party's potential impact to see if they meet your requirements. Test prospective third parties' performance and availability from a QA environment for a week and make sure they don't breach your performance requirements. Use synthetic tests from multiple locations because tags are served differently for users depending on their location and browsing history. Understand the new tag's technical requirements. Open a line of communication with the vendor to be immediately informed of updates, changes or errors. And be sure to repeat your what-if tests to understand how your site reacts to the prospective tag's failure. Don't stop testing once your tags are live. Ensure that your providers are meeting your certification requirements. Monitor individual tags to detect poor performers and create alerts to notify your team when there's a failure to ensure they don't disrupt your site. Again, Make sure you fully understand all your tag's technical requirements so that any errors that occur can be corrected internally. Additionally, group your third-party requests into a zone and set up tests and alerts to notify you when the performance of the zone has breached a predetermined threshold. Monitoring your third parties as a whole will ensure that you're not adding too many technologies that will compromise your site performance. The demand for new marketing technologies will only increase. Adding new technologies may help marketing hit their KPIs, but IT's performance KPIs might suffer as a result. A company must have a clear set of rules and processes for vetting new tags that could be problematic, removing tags that are impacting performance, or enforcing a maximum allowable number, size and speed of third-party tags. Here's how you can make your case. Present the data you have collected. Correlate to business metrics. For example, saying a tag costs the company $10,000 in revenue resonates more than saying it costs 1.5 seconds in performance time. Trust your data and stay firm with your requirements. Constant evaluation of both your tags and your business goals will allow you to keep your house in order and maximize your site's efficiency as it relates to your company's bottom line. By establishing a clear set of standards and adhering to them, you can get everyone on the same page, eliminate finger pointing, and save yourself a lot of headaches down the road. By following the best practices for configuration, management and monitoring of your third parties, IT can regain control of third-party performance and tackle the issues they present.
All right, thank you very much, Robert and Jay. Now we're going to dive into some of the questions that were posed during the talk, and I'd like to encourage anyone else listening who has a question about any aspect of the material covered today to type it into the chat window, and we'll get to as many as we can before Jay and Robert have to head out. So we're going to, the way we're going to do this is just kind of direct these questions directly towards one of the two presenters based off of the content of it. However, if obviously Jay and Robert, if you have something to add, more than welcome to do so. So the first question is for Robert. What sort of metrics should I be looking at to weight tag's business impact against its performance degradations?
Okay, so excellent question. So with the tags on a page, best practice with designing of the web page is to move third-party tags as far down the page as the page construction as you possibly can. This will ensure that the primary content, i.e. the content you want the users to see within the page, and obviously your own content is displayed first, and then the third-party tags come a lot later. This is going to ensure that the customer or your users get the best possible experience. They're not left staring at a blank screen or a white screen for long periods of time. Because with third-party tags, like we've discussed in the presentation today, they're out of your control. They're hosted on other servers. And if they're going to impact the delivery of the page or pages of your site, then you could see customer abandonment and obviously frustration, and you're not going to hit your conversions. And once you've established that, you can then, using a tool like Catchpoint, monitor these tags individually, or as we've mentioned in the presentation, we can group them into what we call zones, whereby you can bundle together, for example, social media tags, you can have analytical tags, whatever the case may be, you can bundle these into zones and track their performance over time. And obviously what you're wanting to see is that they are not blocking, they are loading asynchronously where possible, and they are being delivered in a timely and speedy fashion.
Okay, great. So the next question is for Jay. Why are tags so critical? Why do we even need them in the first place?
Well, they supply a lot of the underlying functionality that users expect in a modern experience, whether that's live chat or advertising, personalization, e-commerce upsell. A lot of those tags are supplying that critical functionality to your site or to your user experience, and you can't. These days, we're always striving for that better user experience.
All right, thank you. Now, next one is for Jay as well. Do you have any advice on how to control piggyback tags?
So one of the key, going back to this prime directive, the idea here is that your tags should be asynchronous, so that when you are firing off these tags, it's happening in the background in a separate thread in the browser, so you're not impacting that user experience. If that's the case, then it doesn't matter where the tag lives on the page or anything like that, because it's all being done in the background. That is also true of these piggyback image requests. So as long as the parent tag is asynchronous and it is being run in the background, then the end user is not going to experience that delay of the piggybacked or the chained image request. Now, all bets are off if that tag is synchronous and blocking, because then you've got to wait for all of those servers to potentially respond, depending upon how they've engineered all of that infrastructure. Now, you know, these days everything works pretty well, but again, you've got the situation where you can't control all of these individual vendors. We can't control the internet. I think going back to that prime directive, that's why we say the most important thing is the user experience, maintaining that strong user experience, and we hold our vendors responsible for making sure that they can collect all the information, that they're performing at peak performance, so that we're collecting the data that we need, that they're getting the data that they need for their advertising and assessments and performance assessments and all of that.
Okay, the next one is for Robert. Per your earlier response, are you implying that the tag manager should also be located at the bottom of the page?
Well, from my experience, and I'm sure Jay can back me up, is that the tag management tool is usually loaded further towards the top of the page, but then it's responsible for where it inserts the tag within the page itself. Is that with the Tealium tool, Jay? Is that, would you confirm that?
Yeah, that's right. That gives us more control over when we decide to load the individual tags, depending on their functionality and depending upon their performance benefits.
Okay, now I imagine this one will be for Jay as well. Based on your experience, do you feel there's a lack of tag management processes in various organizations?
Absolutely. I think it is a bit like the Wild West sometimes, where and it's understandable. You know, IT and web development organizations are pretty stressed for getting their infrastructure, keeping their infrastructure running, keeping up with the Joneses and all the new functionality and all of that. So, you know, responding to a marketing team who is constantly asking them to put on the newest, greatest shiny object, and we marketers love, you know, shiny objects, that can cause a lot of chaos if you're trying to do that in an ad hoc fashion. So I do see that it becomes kind of a knee-jerk reaction in most organizations, and they tend to not think too critically or not critically enough about what that tag management should be all about, and how they should implement those technologies on their site or their mobile app.
And to back Jay up, the amount of times that I see data, or I go through customers' data and we see a troublesome tag and they're sort of like say, didn't even know we had that one still on the site. It just goes to show that a lot of tags end up being orphans, and they're unloved and uncared for. And it is interesting to see, you know, that when people introduce a tag management system, how much of an improvement it has on the site's overall performance. And moving forward, you know, as they run flash campaigns and as they run individual targeting and marketing exercises, once that has finished and completed, the tag is removed by the tag management system, and you don't have these tags just hanging about and living there forever and ever and ever. And when you sort of like do an audit of your site, and I recommend that everybody that isn't running tag management goes away and does an audit of their site, and just have a look and see what tags you do have on that page, and really question as to whether the business really needs those tags moving forward.
And that can be pretty serious, by the way. I mean, if you have unmanaged tags, those are potentially the potential for data breach is quite high, right? Because you may have had a relationship with a third-party vendor in the past, but you may not have that relationship anymore, but you may still be sending them data because those tags are on your site as a result of a previous relationship. So getting control over that can give you a lot of give you a lot of assurance that you're managing your data correctly as well.
Okay, this one I think both of you could definitely weigh in on. Are there any good resources, for example, white papers, of how to tie site performance in terms of time to demand in terms of dollars?
Robert, you want to go for that first, or?
I'm not. I don't have any white papers myself to hand on that, but we have seen time and time again that when sites are impacted by third-party tag issues, that they can that can impact your revenues. I mean, there's a very popular story or article on the internet that pulls up that if, for example, Amazon goes down, for every second it's down, there's millions of potential dollars of revenue lost. And this was an issue just the other week with the, if anybody's a Mac user, the App Store was down for a considerable chunk of the day. Now, I know that's not a third-party tag, but again, it just shows the impact that when anything goes down or anything is impacted by circumstances outside your control, and in their case it was a DNS issue, but again, you think how many apps weren't sold that day, and it's the same for any site that relies upon turning users into spending money with them on their site, whether it's travel, whether it's e-com. As soon as users become frustrated or they abandon the site, there is a potential sale lost.
Absolutely, and just to back that up, a few years back, Aberdeen did a study where they said that for every second of delay on your site, that's a 7% decrease in the conversion rate that you might see on your site. So that's a pretty big number if you start adding it up.
Okay, the next one would be for Robert. Can loading ads after document complete lead to a decrease in impressions and therefore a decrease in revenue as well? So maybe it would. I think the question is saying, like, would you give ads more leeway in terms of where they would be loading on your site?
I guess that comes down to the business decisions on how they want to gain revenue from the site. But if I was a travel site, for example, I would definitely want my ability to search for a hotel or a flight to be present on the site first, and then any additional adverts to come after that. I mean, the classic example is the amount of sites you go to and you get these live chats. Now, these live chats always load after the page is loaded, because you want to be able to actually see the page first before you get something popping up asking if you would like to chat to an advisor live on the site. Again, you can control the content that is on your site, the first-party content. This is in your control. This is your responsibility. As soon as you shift outside of that zone, you don't have that control, and thus you do not want to impact the loading of your own content, because it could define a miserable or slow experience for the end user. So yeah, best practice, web best practice, along with all the other best practices out there, is where possible, move your JavaScript to the bottom of the page, move your third-party tags down the page, and focus on getting your primary content in front of your end users and customers.
Yeah, I think that's right. When we look at that going back to that prime directive in terms of synchronous versus asynchronous, that the idea there that in almost all cases your end user experience comes first. It's the thing that matters the most, and it's not that these ads might not be important to you. It's that you got to prioritize these things, because some things, as Robert says, they're not in your control.
Okay, now again, this one I think can probably be answered by both of you. What are the most useful or widely used metrics for assessing tag performance?
So from a Catchpoint perspective, the bits that we look for when we're analyzing the data on web pages is that we want to see that the wait times and the connect times are as small as they possibly can be, because there's nothing worse than waiting 2 or 3 seconds for the JavaScript content, if it's JavaScript that's been pulled down, to actually be pulled into the site. Then obviously you start looking at other metrics to ensure that the tag is being served up compressed, and then you want to ensure that it's not blocking. So you look to see if it's actually causing other content after that to block. You want to ensure that that if it's got child requests, that they are firing as well. So the main focus up front is the initial connect and wait times. The quicker they are, the quicker the tag is going to get into the browser and then be handled by the browser, because obviously the browser's got to go through the whole process of compiling and executing that JavaScript. And if you have a lot of third-party tags on the page, that's a lot of round trips for the browser to make, and it's a lot of compiling and execution of those tags in the browser. So the browser, bless it, it does do an awful lot of work, especially if you are tag heavy.
And I don't have much to add there. I think Robert's covered it very well. I would just say that, again, tag management can help here, because ensuring that all these tags are asynchronous and running in the background ensures that this performance that you're running isn't going to impact that user experience. So you obviously want to for other reasons, make sure that all of the vendors you're working for have good performance profiles. But from an end user experience standpoint, it's important to mitigate that risk.
Okay, and this next one is for Jay as well. How would you define data governance, and to what extent is that responsibility linked to tag management within an organization?
Well, I think it is something that a lot of companies are very concerned about. What is the data that lives on their website, is available to the browser, is generated as a result of the interactions on your site, and where does that go? Right. So one of the key things about having a tag management system in place is you can define this data layer that unifies all of the data that goes to these individual tags, and that unification is really the basis for data governance. So you can know that consistently all the data is being expressed in the same way and shared with all of your vendors in the same way. So consistency is part of that data governance conversation, but also which vendors can get that data. So mapping a particular data element to a particular vendor but not to another is a way for you to be in control over what data these vendors get, because some vendors you do business with you may not want them to have order IDs from your e-commerce system or some other key metric, because maybe they're just not the right vendor for that, and you need control over that situation. So that's another key area where tag management can help, because we're really putting all of that data governance in one place, giving you the ability to define all of the key data elements and then decide which vendors can have that data at any given point.
Okay, this one is for Robert. Can you clarify what bottleneck time means and why it's an important metric with third parties?
Okay, good question. So inside of Catchpoint, we calculate what we call bottleneck time. And the bottleneck time is basically where we see how much a particular tag on the page is holding up the page. And we can basically link those calls within Catchpoint to calculate the bottleneck time. So for example, you have a tag fire, that's going to obviously maybe potentially fire something else, and that we can basically look at the chain of events through the web page and pull those together and work out the total time that all took, and then thus calculate the bottleneck time. And we don't just do it for third-party tags, we do it for the first-party content as well. So we can look and really dissect a page and understand where the biggest bottlenecks are on the page. It could be that all of the third-party tags are firing beautifully, but you could have a very slow query yourself that, on your search step, for example, we're seeing that there is a call initiated to return the search results in a JSON format, for example, and we see that that's extremely slow, and that could be a bottleneck on the site as well.
All right, we're going to do one more. This one is for Jay. Jay, you mentioned conditional load rules. So how does that work, and how does it improve overall tag performance?
Well, so if you have the ability to decide when a tag is fired across your site or your mobile app, it gives you the ability to just reduce the weight of the tags on any given page. So the example I used before was a situation where you might have a tag that is only interested in an order confirmation because they're trying to credit an affiliate, as an example. Those tags only need to live on one page in your entire site and don't need to get fired off on the home page, for example, where it's high traffic and you are constantly going there. Having the ability in tag management to say, okay, this particular tag is really only necessary in this particular instance is something that we do very well, and it's very easy to do in tag management. But it can also be more complex than that. You can have a situation where maybe for a certain time of day, you only want the tag to run. So maybe you're working with an advertising partner, you're doing some A/B testing with a particular advertising partner, and you can decide that during certain parts of the day I want to test this vendor, and you can create logic that says that it only happens during certain parts of the day. Or perhaps you have a situation like you're using a live chat vendor, and that live chat vendor, you really only want to run that functionality on a particular portion of your site, maybe the support portion of your site. Well, you can easily create a rule that says, oh, well, this live chat, I don't want it on every page. I only want it on the pages that where they're likely to be wanting to ask me a question. Maybe that's a product page, or maybe that's the support portion of my site. So those load rules can be very complex, or they can be very simple, but overall they give you the ability to improve the performance by focusing on the areas that where these tags need to run, and not increasing the page weight because you have to put them on every page.
All right, I think we're going to wrap things up now. There were a couple other questions, including a couple that were a bit more product specific that I think would be best to leave to kind of follow-up communications. And we will be reaching out to everyone who attended and who signed up with further material, so you can continue learning about third parties and tag management. And if there are any other questions at that point, I can't speak for Jay, but I'm sure Robert and everyone else at Tealium would be happy to answer any other questions that the attendees have. So I'd like to once again thank Jay and Robert for taking the time today, as well as everyone who attended. If you'd like to learn more about tag management and web performance, please stop by the company websites at www.tealium.com and www.catchpoint.com. All right, thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.